Welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast, the podcast where we explore issues of local, national, and international significance in a calm, measured, and reasonable way to get to the heart of the matter. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury. Good evening and welcome everyone from our short Easter break, so into our summer season. So today in a bit
Is it a spring-summer collection, or is it? Are we into summer already? Have you jumped the gun, Simon?
Well, I don't know, but hopefully it's not going to ruin the weather.
No.
So, because otherwise, when we break up in July, then surely that after that when we come back is August. But anyway, talking of calm and reasonable, but probably thoroughly annoyed. They might use different words, and we'll let them use them in a second. We are joined this evening by Solent WASPI women. To talk to us about their campaign and where that is now and what's happened recently and what their response is to the government's response to the Ombudsman basically saying that there should be compensation. So good evening and welcome, ladies.
Evening.
Okay, so I'll let each of you introduce yourselves in a second, but just before I do, please, if I can just remind all of our viewers that if you do want to join in on the conversation, please do let us know what you think on Facebook and on YouTube. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up, give us a comment, give us a subscribe, give us a follow. But basically, we feed off that sort of stuff because basically. There's no money in it otherwise. So, if I can ask you first, Sheila, if you can introduce yourself and talk around how you got involved in the WASPI campaign.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sheila Simmons, and I'm the coordinator for the Solent and Isle of Wight WASPI supporters group. And I've been involved in the campaign since about 2016. I was born in March 1954. And I expected to get my state pension at 60, and I finally ended up getting it when 5.5 years late in July 2019. Now, there'd been two pensions acts leading up to that, one in 1995 and one in 2011, and I didn't know anything about the first one. And the second one, I was only alerted to when I did finally get a letter from the DWP, and I know many people didn't, telling me about the second increase when I hadn't been aware of the first. So talking to other women, I realised there were lots of people who didn't know about these increases and the huge impact it would have on their retirement plans. And so I then heard about WASPI and I thought it was a big injustice. And so that's when I got involved.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you very much, Sheila. And if I can then come to Barbara, if you can tell us how you got involved.
Yes, I'm Barbara Wild, and I did know about the 95 Pension Act. So I was aware that I would be waiting until I was 65 to get my state pension. I was born in May 1955. But my reason really for joining WASPI was because I was absolutely devastated by the 2011 increase, which actually accelerated the transition period. And in my case, added another whole year onto my pension age. And I think really I'd become very aware of the difference that time made when my friends who were 5 years older than me had begun to retire. And I was aware, good grief, I'm going to have to wait another whole 5 years, I thought at that point. And then when I came back from sick leave, having had throat cancer, being absolutely broke because I'd gone down to half pay, feeling still unwell, and then to find that I had another whole year to wait when I was already really struggling to see how I could get through to the age of 65. Well, I was devastated and very glad when I heard about WASPI to be able to join them.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Barbara. Amanda, if I can ask you the same, how did you get involved?
Oh, hi. Well, I'm kind of more involved in the back room, really, locally, helping WASPI to set up their Facebook presence and things like that. I don't take myself up to the Houses of Parliament alongside Sheila and others who are very valiant in doing such things. But I don't do that because I'm a bit too vocal, and I would probably rock the boat a little too much and say the wrong things directly to the right people. But you know, I'm very much part of the campaign in the sense that I support it. I support the women who, you know, go out of their way to do it, and to champion us, all of us women. I was born in November 1954, towards the end of November, and I'm in that 6-week bracket that copped for the lot, really. An estimated loss of pension of £49,000. And the upshot of that for me was, I've got lots of detailed stories with dates, actually, which suggest that women didn't know at all. And not only women, people in authority didn't know either. But we'll come to those perhaps a little later. But yeah, so I suppose one of the biggest things was that I was forced to sell my house because my mortgage went up to £800 a month, just around the time that I bowed out of full-time working for many, many reasons, and went from a 3-bedroomed house to a 1-bedroom flat, and still could hardly afford to live. And I'm actually still working to some extent now, and I'm 70. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And last but not least, Catherine, how about yourself?
Hello. Well, I'm the oldest one in the group. I don't usually reveal my age, but I'm one of the people I marginally qualify for WASPI. I am a 1950s woman, but I was born in 1950 at the very end of the year. I was one of the few people who was actually told face to face that there would be a wait for my state pension. I'd returned to the MOD at some vain hope that my career would, my stagnating career, I thought I might be able to sort of boost my income. And I went to the MOD, and my executive officer actually placed a table in front of me, which actually showed that I would wait 9 months. Well, 9 months in the scheme of things for your pension. And I was only, I was 44 at the time of the act. I thought, well, that's not too bad. And I didn't give it any more thought. It was gone. I had no follow-up letter, nothing from the DWP, and I didn't give it any thought. But over time, it must have been in the back of my mind. Anyway, fast forward to the year, to whenever it was, 2015, I think it was then, I bumped into Sheila, who I knew sort of slightly, and I asked her what she was doing now. And she explained that she was campaigning with an organisation called WASPI. And I shared the injustice of it, that I realised that many women were in a much worse position than me. I did only wait 9 months. And yet, as Barbara pointed out early, there was this fast forward. They zoomed forward with the pace of change. And I could not believe it. And I joined the campaign around about then, 2015-16.
No, that's been brilliant. Thank you all for your introductions and how a brief kind of insight as to how things might impact you. If I can just come back to you, Sheila, we hear the word WASPI a lot. It might be one of those mnemonics that people don't kind of have heard it but don't know what it stands for. And can you just give us a bit of clarity as to what it is that who the WASPI women are, and effectively what your campaign is asking for?
Yes, sure. So WASPI is Women Against State Pension Inequality, and we are campaigning for compensation for the way that the changes to state pension age were introduced for women born in the 1950s. The campaign began in 2015 when it became clear that a lot of women didn't know that these changes were taking place. And I should stress that we're campaigning against the process, not the policy, because we actually believe it's right that men and women should have the same state pension age. But the way that it was handled and implemented, with women being kept in the dark, was a huge problem. And WASPI took legal advice and were advised that making complaints of maladministration against the DWP would be the way forward. So that process started, and it was quite a lengthy process. It involved about 4 stages, I think. Women wrote letters of complaint to the DWP because some had had a 6-year delay added to their state pension age, one from 1995 and then one from 2011. And so we put these letters of complaint into the DWP, and the aim of that was to get them to the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman for a ruling. And so that's what happened. Thousands of women actually put in their complaints, and in the end, there were so many that they stopped accepting any more.
Right.
The Ombudsman selected 6 cases, which he said was representative of all the issues that were being talked about when women sent in their complaints. And eventually, after a 6-year-long investigation, we were vindicated by the Ombudsman, who said that the evidence showed from the DWP was that they knew that women didn't know what was happening and they failed to do anything about it. So the Ombudsman said that was maladministration. He said that that caused an injustice, and he said that women should be compensated for that maladministration. And he took the unusual step of laying his report before Parliament, because all his dealings with the DWP indicated that they would not comply with the recommendations. So that's where we are at the moment.
And I guess for our younger listeners or viewers, prior to sort of 1950, there was a difference in the state pension age where women retired at 60, men retired at 65. And that was looked to be equalised. And I guess part of it's about the communication, isn't it? And I think sometimes we have to frame things that, we don't understand why, that people can say, well, did you not see it on Facebook back in the 1990s? And I guess the answer is, we live in an age of social media communications. 30 years ago, it was a whole different process. And I think if I understand you correctly, it's that lack of clear communication of the changes which are at the heart of your concerns.
That's it, absolutely, Ian. That's right. Yes, it's the failure to properly communicate life impacting changes. The policy itself is right. We don't have any argument with that. It's right that men and women should receive their state pension at the same age, but you have to be given plenty of warning so that you can prepare for such a major change, especially for women who have not been, shall we say, advantaged in pension opportunities or pay opportunities. And that's something we'll come on to, I'm sure. But, a lot more women than men are reliant on the state pension in their retirement. So for us, this is a huge issue.
Yeah, and I think it will probably come to that later, Sheila, because there's definitely a cultural landscape to set this against as well, isn't there?
Absolutely,
So no, thank you for making that so clear. Simon.
Lovely, thank you. So Barbara, if I can ask you, can you share some experience of how WASPI women have been affected by the changes?
Absolutely. Certainly, a lot of people weren't in the sort of more fortunate position I was in having an occupational pension to be able to fall back on, because I didn't make it till 66. I took advantage of voluntary redundancy at the age of nearly 62. But the result of that was that I was just living on a small occupational pension, and my savings have really depleted. but certainly in the campaigning with WASPI, we've heard about people, women who have divorced and the divorce lawyers didn't know, and so they were having their divorce settlements based on the fact that they would retire at 60, which has made a huge difference to them. People have made life-changing decisions, maybe to leave work and care for someone, thinking that they only had a short while to wait for their pensions. And in fact, you know, very belatedly found out that they were going to have to wait another up to 6 years. So, you know, we've heard some terrible stories about people who have been really disadvantaged by the fact that they didn't know about the state pension changes. But as you've said, it's not just about that. It's the fact that, you know, you're calling this, are we the shortchanged generation? And yes, we are, because of the way work has changed so much. And many women face the motherhood penalty, if you like. You know, we don't have the same opportunities necessarily to build up big pension pots because of working part-time to care for children, and being carers for other family members. So yeah, certainly I would agree with the premise that we are the shortchanged generation.
It's kind of double or triple whammy then, really in that case.
Yes.
Amanda, did you have anything to add on experiences and examples that that you've seen or that people have shared with you?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I can speak probably more about my own experience than other people's, but I would like to start off by saying that also having a half occupational pension, so I've got 17 years worth of occupational pension, that I am better off than thousands and thousands of other WASPI women. But nonetheless, it has impacted me hugely. And so I think the best way to illustrate that is to tell you my personal stories, or the parts of it that might be helpful. And I am one of those women that Barbara spoke about. I divorced, and there was a complication to my divorce. But in that divorce, I was with a fairly local solicitors, and they made a bit of a mess of it all. But those solicitors did not mention that this change in the pension age was happening. I didn't know anything about it then. The process started for me on the divorce front in 1999, so that's 4 years after the first act. And it wasn't mentioned. But the divorce didn't actually happen then, although it was being predicated on pensions alone. So the only benefit that I would get from my ex-husband was based on my pension income, his pension income, when those would kick in. And my state pension is down. It's documented from that solicitor as being going to happen when I was 60. So that was all part of the negotiation as to how much I would get a portion of my husband's pension, but predicated on when my pensions kicked in. So that was the first little bit of that. But because that lawyer, those solicitors were found not to be doing a very good job, the case actually went to the Law Society and was put under scrutiny. And it was under scrutiny for 2 years. Nobody from the Law Society said anything either. Then when they had concluded their inquiry, all the money I'd paid to the solicitor was refunded, And I was fortunate because I was apportioned a lawyer for free somewhere else in the country, completely different area of the country. So that was useful. But that new lawyer didn't mention it either.
Wow.
And so my divorce settlement, so this actually spanned from 1999 to when my divorce actually was finalized in 2006. And no one, lawyers, solicitors, Law Society employees alike, mentioned that my state pension would not come through when I was 60. And so my divorce settlement was still predicated on that premise. And that's really what led to my having to sell the house, because I also, in that time, having left my husband after a couple of years, bought a house, and the mortgage was based on my income and what my income would be. And nothing there was said about my not retiring at 60. And so it went on. And so we can see that if officials like that, people in the business, mine was one of the, when we first started, mine was one of the first cases. I think there had been 3 prior to me where a divorce was predicated on pensions alone, or at all. So it was fairly new to them, but you would think they would know the law, wouldn't you? But yes, there was all of that. And then for a number of reasons, I took early retirement when I was 54, almost 55. There were lots of reasons for that. But in conversation with Hampshire County Council Finance Office, I was made aware that I wouldn't be retiring at 60. And was I sure that this was the right thing to do, to take my take retirement from my teaching job early? Well, it was the right thing to do. And I won't go into the details of that now, but the delay that they told me was one of 2 years. Not the 5 that the law said at that time, because it was that it all happened in 2009. I was told 2 years, when in actual fact I should have been told 5. And I made a calculation, therefore, that when I took my teacher's pension, which would happen immediately, I could draw down a lump sum, which I would put to one side, which would see me through those 2 years. But of course, it wasn't enough to see me through 6.
No.
So I went back to work. I actually did still work anyway, and was expecting to work in some capacity till I was 60. But I've continued to do work where I can, mostly on 0 contracts, which, you know, are also difficult, of course.
Doesn't give you
but there are, but trying to find a job when you're post 60 is very, very difficult. Nobody wants to invest in someone who might be ill, you know, who, you know, might not be as quick at something as a younger person might be. And so the types of jobs that you can get are not the ones that pay particularly well, usually. And you know, you're in a vulnerable position because it's never, or almost never, secure employment. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's a very personal and detailed kind of explanation of all of those things going wrong. Just as a follow up to that, I just wondered if I can ask Catherine: is the situation kind of worse in any particular industries or any geographies? Is it kind of worse in some areas than others, or is it kind of quite evenly spread nationally?
I don't think it is, but can I just say that Amanda's experience, it's a case of there but for the grace of God go I. Now, I could have been in that great 6-year dip if I'd been a little bit younger. If I were, born in 1955. the familiarity. It's very hard to ask this question. You could do a north-south divide, and you could look and say that women in the north of my age, born in the 1950s, have seen, you know, their careers have mirrored the decline in industry and the depletion of work, and the fact that so many women across that area have had to go into part-time. The husbands lost jobs, so they had to go into part-time work, which is poorly paid, probably temporary. Those the part-time temporary people, and I am a part-time temporary person. The part-time temporary people anywhere are vulnerable. They lose out on their national insurance, so they don't have a full state pension. And of course, we know that the change, if you were a woman born in the 1950s, a big hack of your career, you haven't been able to join a part-time, you haven't been able to join your occupational pension if you were part-time. That didn't change. So the 90s, that had a direct effect on me. I've got a very poor teacher's pension because I wasn't able to join when I started teaching. But, you know, it's easy to say there's a north-south divide because you're now looking, the south of England is the area now, of course, where public sector cuts are. So in fact, those women, we've all suffered historical inequalities. So our drag on our careers, you know, being assumed that we were going to leave and have babies, that affected you whether you did or not. And the fact that employers could ask you, well, are you going to get married and leave? Well, because we're not going to invest in you. But you could then look at the south of England and say, well, you know, we can't play catch up because we're disadvantaged anyway. Clearly, someone in a professional occupation who at least has got a good occupational pension is better off than someone who's had to survive. I mean, I'm sure we could all find from our own knowledge some dreadful, really heartbreaking stories of ill health. And I mean, in the north, you correlate their poor situation with really chronic mortality rates, women dying in their early 60s. It's quite dreadful. But so I would say that none of us are safe. I mean, if you look at the academic world, like, you know, Amanda and I both share that in common. You know, there are a lot of lecturers doing a really stonking job with doctorates. They're on 0 hours or not much better than that. So I'm having a little ramble there. But
No, that's
No.
and the other thing I have to say is that whether we have a good occupational pension and we are actually comfortably off, and we maybe got husbands who've looked after us, that state pension is our right. Whether we are poor or rich, we have a right to have that state pension. Sorry, I'm...
No,
of course.
Thank you, Catherine. There's some really good points. If we can just now look at this through the sort of political lens, prior to the last election, there were an awful lot of high-profile politicians in opposition who seemed very supportive of the WASPI cause. That seems to have melted away. Can I ask you, Sheila, for your kind of observations on that, and how does that make you feel?
Well, it's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, we were, I don't know, call us naive, I don't know, but you know, we were brought up to that if we did the right things and we worked hard and we paid our tax and we paid our national insurance, that the state would give us some measure of security in older age. And also, you know, I mean, when the politicians in opposition, who for years and years have been standing alongside us. I mean, I was amazed in December to see my photo go, you know, plastered across the media with Liz Kendall, because she had volunteered to come and hold a placard to say how much she supported us. And yet in December, there she was, not only saying that we weren't to have compensation, but actually blaming us for the situation that we were in. So it was extraordinary to us. And she wasn't the only one. I mean, Keir Starmer previously had spoken about the historic injustice we had suffered, you know, what WASPI women had been through. And they accused the previous government of kicking the WASPI can down the road or kicking it into the long grass, and then they turned around and kicked us in the teeth. So we were outraged, we were baffled, and locally, I mean, both our MPs in Portsmouth had been supportive of us. Now, we realised that that ministerial responsibilities preclude people from straying too far from the government line. And so we're hoping, for instance, that Stephen Morgan is doing what he can behind the scenes to help us, even if he can't speak publicly as he used to. But, we know that a large number of Labour MPs support us, and that's across all wings of the party. And that's been proved in Westminster Hall debates since the election and since Liz Kendall's announcement that we weren't going to get compensation. And, they've all supported us. And the only Labour MP to disagree in those debates has been the Pensions Minister, Torsten Bell. So I don't know, it's baffling, really. And also, we think this is probably why the Ombudsman laid the report before Parliament. The idea is for Parliament to make the decision, not the government. And the government actually is the perpetrator in this case and has set itself up also as judge, jury, and sentencer. And that is actually disrespecting us. It's disrespecting the Ombudsman because it's undermining the work of the Ombudsman, and it's disrespecting Parliament, we think. So, a mixture of emotions, but I suppose bewilderment is probably the main one, followed by anger.
No, I think that seems very reasonable. I'm going to ask Amanda, because you said you might be a bit more forthright, and I think Sheila's been pretty forthright there. How does it feel, Amanda, that everyone was happy to stand shoulder to shoulder when it felt like it was politically expedient to do so? Now can't remember ever supporting you. How does that feel?
Well, it's a despicable situation, to be frank. I have a history with the Labour Party, and I've done a lot of battling online for various causes, including WASPI. But I don't want to get into the personal issues here. I'll save that for some flag waving outside of a certain office on Albert Road, perhaps.
Absolutely. No, and it is very, again, we've discussed a number of political topics, and Simon and I often remain a little bit baffled at the moment, which is, there are things, the current government has a huge majority, could effectively do anything it wanted to, and is making some interesting choices. So I won't be drawn any further.
I think Barbara.
Can I just say, though?
Sure. Of course you can.
Yeah.
Can I just say that I feel utterly betrayed, because we did have such warm words from Stephen Morgan, and it's not just him. Sheila, Catherine, and myself were there with Rachel Reeves at the when she was sort of advertising her book, and she was there with us with the banner. And now she's Chancellor. No, we're not to have any money. It is a real betrayal. I certainly was so pleased when we got 2 MPs from Labour in Portsmouth, and I can't tell you the depth of my disappointment and feeling of betrayal with the Labour Party. It's beyond belief the way they're behaving.
No, thank you for being so honest with us. It is slightly difficult to understand.
Especially with the Lib Dems and their tuition fees experience, you'd have thought that
Yes.
people
Still
would have learned
scarred,
from
Simon. Yeah, get over it. You're still scarred. Move on.
Yes. So you've all kind of alluded to it. So in March last year, the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman recommended the compensation would be paid to the affected women of between £1,000 and £2,950. Not really kind of life-changing sums, considering the examples that we've talked about here. What sort of difference could that make if those payments were going ahead? Can I just put that to Sheila first, and if anyone else wants to come in, by all means, please do.
Well, no, they're not life-changing sums of money, but actually a lot of WASPI women are in very straitened circumstances, and they would welcome that money. They would welcome any amount, really. But of course, they've used up whatever small amount of savings they've been able to make, trying to tide them over from when they thought they would get their state pension to when they actually got it. And they are in very, very difficult circumstances. But having said that, I think we would say that the amount that the Ombudsman has recommended is not actually commensurate with the level of injustice that we have suffered. And in fact, the Ombudsman did accept that the cases he looked at possibly were not the worst cases, and that there were women outside of that particular sample that he looked at who would be much worse off or badly affected by what had happened. And the all-party parliamentary group, who supports us in Parliament, they had recommended £10,000 for the worst affected. And so we would say possibly that what the Ombudsman is recommending as a minimum, but it is important that women get compensation.
Yes. And is there much hope of getting the government to reverse its positions and make those payments while they can still be of some help? I don't want to kind of say that indelicately, because
they could do that now. They could do the right thing and backtrack. There's nothing to stop them doing that. We'll probably talk in a minute about the court case that we're hoping to pursue, but there's nothing to stop them doing the right thing. They 99.9% of Ombudsman's recommendations are complied with. And the Ombudsman said that he fears becoming a toothless tiger if the government can just ride roughshod over the recommendations. And that really is why it should go to Parliament for a vote, because it's not for the government to decide this, it's for Parliament to decide this. It's for MPs to decide this. It's for MPs to have a free vote to decide this. And so, the government just taking that decision for itself is, well, it's not justice, actually. We feel that we've been stitched up by the government because they're not allowing Parliament to have a say. And they're ignoring what's being said by its own independent watchdog. So we really can't understand why they're doing this. And we would say you came to government on a platform of restoring trust and integrity to government, and you came declaring to be the party of social justice. So if you are the party of social justice and you believe in trust and integrity, then reverse this decision. It's very simple. We don't have to go along this road of court action. They could just do the right thing now, and we really urge them to do that.
Thank you. Did anyone want to add anything to that one at all?
Well, I do. Oh, sorry.
Go on.
I do think that is a very small sum. However, it is a gesture in the right direction. I mean, we're owed. Not me. I'm not going to gain anything by it. I don't fall in the bracket, and I don't want it. But it would be an apology and some sort of acknowledgement that women have been wronged. If you add that money, I mean, it's a trifling sum, but if you think a lot of us have lost the winter fuel payment, because a huge amount of women will never qualify for pension credit, even though they haven't got anything. And it just would have made some kind of reparation. It's not enough, but it would have been a start, maybe a basis for further talks. I don't know. But, it's, as everyone said, betrayal is the key word here, isn't it?
Could I add something here as well? I agree with everything that Sheila and then Catherine have said, of course. But I think it also needs to be noted that women have died waiting for this. They have died in debt waiting for this, and that debt then gets carried by their families. It's not just about the women. And in many cases, lives have been shortened by not having this money. You know, I sit here in the winter in a very, very low temperature because I'm still paying off the debt from when I was having to buy my food on credit cards. And, you know, it's not a good place to be sitting in a flat at, you know, 11 degrees, 12 degrees, because you simply cannot afford the fuel. And all because you've accrued debt because there was such a delay that you didn't know about. And as we've all said previously, you know, there are people far worse off than us, women far worse off than we are. And we all know of the stories about women moving into their cars because they couldn't do anything else because they didn't have the money to do it. And yes, an acknowledgement by the apportioning of the Ombudsman's recommendation would be something, at least. It would be an acknowledgement. But at the moment, we've got faces turned to the wall, and that's just not on.
Well, thank you for that. And that leads me on to that sort of,
Can I just say
no,
one other thing?
no, please.
That in increasing our state pension age, the government has saved over 181 billion pounds.
Wow.
We're asking for a fraction of that in compensation. I'd just like to make that point.
No, and I think that's a really valid point. It is that element of, you know, in terms of, and thank you, it's been really helpful for kind of you to lay that out, and it leads me into that next question, which is, it feels like there is an element of doubling down at the moment from the government, which is oh, you knew really, didn't you? And I guess in terms of, you've got the ombudsman's recommendations, has the government offered anything to kind of substantiate their position, or is it, as you kind of describe it, sort of faces to the wall, they've said their piece and now they're sort of hoping you might go away?
Well, if they're hoping that, you know, no chance. But anyway, yes, they did say that 90% of us knew, which came as a shock to most of us who didn't. And they based that on a very small survey that was done, I think, in 2006 on fewer than 2,000 people, a couple of hundred of which were women in our cohort. And it was on the basis of a general question about, did you know there could be changes to the state pension age in the future? It wasn't a question about personal impact, or do you know what's happening with your personal state pension? It was just a very vague survey. And I mean, the Ombudsman himself called it a red herring. He saw a whole breadth of evidence, including evidence from the DWP itself, which showed that it knew that many women didn't know, and it chose to sit back and do nothing. So, you know, we refute that assertion completely. We completely refute that. And it's just adding insult to injury to try and throw that at us, as if to say, you know, it's your fault. And to hear Liz Kendall say that when she has stood alongside us and knows that what she was saying couldn't possibly be true is, again, it's outrageous.
No, thank you. And it is one of those things where you kind of, if you stand back and look at it objectively, you know, I find myself scratching my head on this one. You know, Simon.
Well, you can see that we've both done a lot of head scratching. So you've gone through quite the roller coaster. you've made your case. It appeared that your campaign was landing to the right ears and was getting listened to. You raised the funds, you gained political support, and even agreement from the ombudsman, as you've said, and then for the government to then reject those conclusions. So I guess the $64 million question is what's next for the campaign. What are the next steps? What hopes are there for turning this around and putting right the wrong that you've talked about?
Well, after legal advice, we WASPI were advised to seek judicial review because the government's decision making on this. First to say yes, we admit we were wrong. There was maladministration, but we're not going to do anything about it. Just seems perverse. So there's going to be a judicial review. We hope a crowd justice appeal was launched, and it reached its initial target in double quick time. We've raised £188,000 to date, and we're hoping that the High Court will force the government to go back and make a lawful decision on this, because we feel that the reasoning is irrational, and it really can't go without being challenged. It must be challenged, and that's what we're hoping to do in court. Of course, it doesn't have to be like this. They could, as we said earlier, they could just reverse their decision. But, we're not going to back down. We have to pursue this because we have right on our side, and it's a matter of justice for us.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I would just like to say that
Sure.
how on earth do they think citizens can hold their government to account if they are going to completely ignore an independent ombudsman? I mean, what are you supposed to do? How can, I mean, part of the reason that I campaign with WASPI is to be a role model for my grandchildren. When you see an injustice, you must do something about it. You can't just sit and let people ride roughshod over you. And that's what I hope to teach them, even though they think it's quite funny if their nan is shouting in the street, waving banners. But we must be able to hold our government to account, surely. And I can't see how they can just ignore the ombudsman. I'm so glad that we are pursuing this through the courts.
That's been brilliant, and I guess we've reached the end of our questions. Just to kind of close the show out, if any of our listeners and viewers feel moved by what they've heard today, how can those of us that are not WASPI women support you in your campaign for justice?
Well, you could donate to our crowd justice appeal for one thing. There's a link there, which I think, are you going to show Simon the link?
Yeah, I can put it back up.
Which there's a link to the crowd justice page on there, which also gives the legal updates and explains the case in far greater detail than we've been able to do today. So we would welcome that support. You can follow us on Facebook. The WASPI campaign has 147,000 plus followers on Facebook and around about 30,000 on X, formerly Twitter. You can find us also, Solent WASPI, on Facebook and on Twitter. And I would just say, following on from what Barbara said about how can a government ride roughshod over the ombudsman, this isn't just a matter for us, because the ombudsman is there to hold government departments to account when they make mistakes. So it might be us this time, it might be you next. So it's in everyone's interests that the integrity of the ombudsman is upheld, and that the government can't get away with undermining it.
Indeed, I mean, it was one of the points that we kind of thought about, and when we had an earlier draft of the questions, there seemed to be lots of injustices that the government or the governments of recent years have faced or looked at, but it seems a strange and unjust situation to have have an ombudsman conclude that an injustice has taken place, but not have the power to insist that the government actually does something about it. That kind of doesn't feel right. And as Barbara said, that kind of speaks to that. How do you hold them to account if there isn't actually really a power, rather than, I guess, at the ballot box, to say, actually, this thing was wrong, now do something to correct it?
Well, yes, absolutely. Begs the question, why have an ombudsman, really? And, the ombudsman conducted a 6-year investigation, a very thorough investigation, and produced a report. And there's the government just undermining it and cherry picking, dodgy survey results to justify itself. And well, it seems it's bizarre, isn't it? It's absolutely bizarre. I haven't really got the words, I don't think, to describe how I feel about it.
Can I just say that it's not just the things that we are taking them to court about and have complained to the Ombudsman about have been because they are unlawful, and our lawyers tell us that's been the way to go. But there are a lot of things that have happened that, even though they might have been lawful, just seem to be wrong. Especially things like the acceleration of the transition that happened as a result of the 2011 Act. All the reasons that 1950s born women have been disadvantaged, in the first place, and that adding insult to injury by compounding these things, they might not be unlawful, but there's a lot that's happened that has been wrong. It's a wider problem than just, the months where they didn't take action and they did know that women didn't know. It's a lot broader than that.
No, and I think that's an excellent point you make. Sometimes with these things, there are the things that are unlawful, and there are the things which just aren't morally right. And it feels like in this particular campaign, you've got both on your side. And I guess it is that word bizarre, as to if that's still not enough, where do you go next, is really the head scratching moment, because you would have thought with everything, that phrase having right on your side would have been enough in this instance.
I think it's come as a bit of a shock to find that the government, in a way, is seeing us as the enemy. We've been vindicated, and they seem to be fighting tooth and nail to evade their responsibilities. And what fair-minded government would do that? It's a rhetorical question, but
If we had the answer to that one, I don't think we'd be here on a Sunday evening. But
could I just make a little suggestion?
Of course.
I'm not. If any, I mean, we do encounter doubting Thomases, and they don't believe that we didn't know. You can know something because your friend told you. That is not the same as getting a letter from the DWP. However, the other thing to say is, if you don't believe us, the Ombudsman's final report, it is long, but it's not sort of full of legalese. It is very readable, and there is so much evidence in there. If only the government had taken time to read that final report, they couldn't have possibly made up this story about how we all knew. So.
No, it's an issue. I did see some of the responses on Twitter we got. There was one response that we'd got, which was kind of, I'll use your phrases. I like it so much. There was a doubting Thomas of and basically kind of questioning that. But on the flip side of that, in the comments, as I'm sure is no shock to yourselves, we've got lots of comments of support saying that you're doing an amazing job, saying that it's not women basically saying now that it's the principle and the injustice as much as just the actual money, and it's a absolute kick in the teeth. And obviously this decision has been made under this ruling government, but it obviously the previous government didn't seem to be in any rush to come to a conclusion that would have paid out either. So it's not like it's a party political thing to kind of say. But Kimberly goes on to say that the WASPI won't go away. You fought so hard, and a fine example to women and the young women everywhere to fight for what is right. And it's shocking in this day and age that women are still having to fight for their rights. Sal said, well done all, you've put the case really clearly and not going away until you get justice. And Jill gave her thanks to all four of you for putting that across. So that's kind of seems to be is almost even stranger, doesn't it, in the sense of there is that level of public support for the campaign and actually to counter the injustice, but just sadly not the right decision yet. Hopefully they can change their mind from government.
Well, you'd hope that the local election results would sort of give them a bit of a nudge, because, you know, obviously national decisions have played a part there, and you know, we're pretty sure that our case was a factor in that. It might not have been the main factor, but we know that we do have public support. So, you know, a government needs to listen, doesn't it? It really needs to listen.
Yeah,
absolutely. So we'd like to add our thanks to those of the people who've been commentating, because you've done a fantastic job this evening setting out, you know, really helping to educate. And it is clear that you've got right on your side and public support. So we'll keep everything crossed that eventually justice will prevail for you. So thank you. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sansbury, and our guests this evening have been Sheila, Amanda, Catherine, and Barbara from Solent WASPI. Thank you all very much for giving us your evening and sharing those deeply personal experiences with us. We will be back next week at 6:27 when we'll be looking at Portsmouth City Council's AGM and the whole debate about if the two parties with the next highest number of votes, next highest number of councillors after the administration, both have 9 councillors. Who gets to be the opposition, and how do you decide that? So we'll get into that next week at 6:27. Please do remember to give some like, follows, and subscribes on YouTube. We'll see you next week at 6:27. Thank you very much again, ladies, for sharing that, and we'll see you then. Don't forget to like, follow, and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.